As we were talking about those current protests that are currently taking place in the streets of London, we now try yet again to reach our correspondent in London, Holly Hudson. Good afternoon to you. Apologies there, the gremlins in studio. We couldn't reach you, but continue where you left off. You were talking to us about these protests and the mass gatherings. And of course, the government has emphasized the point that, look, these regulations regarding social distancing are still there. Coronavirus is still there, but indeed people are coming in their numbers regardless to protest the death, the murder of George Floyd. Talk to us about this.
Yes, thousands upon thousands of people, as you can see behind me here. It's so loud, the atmosphere really is electric. Chants of justice for George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. The UK is not innocent, reverberating around Hyde Park here. Protesters now marching down Park Lane. Traffic has stopped all around me. They're moving on to Trafalgar Square eventually, and a series of protests are taking place around the UK, not just in the capital, because anger over the death of George Floyd, the unarmed black man who was killed in police custody in the US, really has spread here to the UK. And people are so angry they have broken the lockdown restrictions, defying the social distancing guidance, which at the moment advocates that mass gatherings shouldn't take place. People shouldn't meet more than up to 6 people outside of their household and should stay 2 meters apart. However, organisers of this protest are very keen, being very cautious to try and ensure that those social distancing measures are adhered to as much as possible. They've urged people to be safe, wear masks, wear gloves. People with megaphones have been directing protesters in one-way systems, and there are police here, several dozen on standby. In the last protest that we saw in central London on Sunday, there were 23 arrests, some for breaching COVID-19 guidelines. We don't know exactly how or why. And while police are on hand at the moment as yet, there has been no sign of unrest here. The atmosphere, while electric, is very, very peaceful. People here just say they want to carry out a demonstration against systemic racism, condemning what happened to George Floyd, condemning President Trump's reaction. But it's not just that. They are also keen to shine a light on what they describe as institutional racism in the UK. They feel that George Floyd's death was a catalyst, and that has stoked anger here over social and racial injustices in the UK. We heard from Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, make his first comments on the situation, on George Floyd's death earlier in Parliament. He said that he perfectly understands people's right to protest, but it should take place in a lawful and reasonable way, and he condemned what happened to George Floyd as appalling and inexcusable.
Holly, speaking of the Prime Minister, I mean, there has been some criticism. You referred to the statement he's made regarding the murder of George Floyd, using the word inexcusable, for example. But people are saying that, you know, it's disappointing that he delayed in giving a statement on condemning the murder of George Floyd. Talk to us about what people are saying in terms of why we saw this delay. I mean, I've read some statements from political analysts who are saying, well, it might be because of his friendship or perceived friendship with US President Donald Trump. Has there been a lot of talk about what the Prime Minister's reaction to all of this is?
Yes, well, we had Prime Minister's questions in Parliament earlier, and the leader of the main opposition party here, Sir Keir Starmer, said he was surprised that the Prime Minister hadn't yet made comment on this. And in fact, he said that George Floyd's case has shone a light on racism around the world, and urged Prime Minister Boris Johnson to confront President Trump over this and convey the UK's abhorrence over George Floyd's death. So this has once again raised questions over the relationship between the US and the UK. Boris Johnson and President Trump calls for him to convey the UK's anger here. And what happened really has resonated with people here in the UK. I mean, as you can hear behind me, people still chanting for justice for George Floyd, chants against President Trump, Boris Johnson too. And the reason is, organisers say that it has refocused similar problems here in the UK. They want accountability and reform so that we don't go in the same direction as the US. And several cases and a report that was released yesterday by the government has only further heightened tensions and feeling here over racial and social inequalities. That report, commissioned by the Health Secretary, by Public Health England, actually found that there was an increased risk of people from ethnic minorities dying from COVID-19, up to 50% more likely if you are black, Asian, Caribbean ethnicity, that you will die from the coronavirus. So people here feeling that there is a disproportionate amount of ethnic minorities dying from the coronavirus and that the government aren't doing enough to protect them. This report, while welcomed, threw up essentially more questions than answers, and there's now pressure on the government to act and to do more. The Health Secretary did say that he shares people's anger over the racial injustices here. Much more does need to be done, and he says the Equalities Minister will look into taking things further. But still here, as you can hear, it's very loud, people very angry, not just over the death of George Floyd, but over what they feel are racial injustices that the UK also needs to confront.
I want to go further into the racial injustices that you talk about in the UK. Interestingly, as you mentioned that, I'm looking at these visuals, and really everyone is on the streets, all races, all walks of life. It seems that everybody has sort of united against this murder of George Floyd. And I mean, in all, in so many countries, you're hearing about, the people being very appalled and upset about all of this. But what are some of the issues that perhaps are not clear, that perhaps in the UK there is that struggle? I mean, in the US we see it quite obviously, where we're seeing, black males being killed by police, for example. What are some of the issues that the public in London, in the UK, are reflecting on as they look at what happened to George Floyd, even though what might be happening there might not be as clear and as obvious as what we're seeing in the United States?
Yes, certainly. As you say, all ethnicities have gathered here, all different backgrounds, all different groups together, uniting. I've seen banners that say, "Together we rise." And in terms of why it's resonated so deeply here, what happened in the US, people very keen to show their solidarity, stand side by side, people have told me, with black Americans in the US. They're disgusted by what happened, disgusted by President Trump's reaction in particular. But people here also have told me about how they feel that while George Floyd's death may have happened 4,000 miles away in Minnesota, it really has been felt here. People say they've been hurt by what has happened. They feel that there is also a knee on the neck of the BME community here. Organisers have said that people can't just stand by when there is a crisis taking place. That is why they've encouraged people to make their voices heard today. And in terms of those particular reasons, cases that people refer to when they talk about why they're angry, those racial injustices that are happening here in the UK, some of those things that we can point out are that report that I just mentioned. That really has served to stoke tensions further, but it also brings to the fore other really controversial issues here in relation to events such as the Grenfell Tower fire in 2017, the Windrush scandal as well. And in terms of specific cases, I'm not sure if you can see behind me, some of the banners refer to a lady called Belly Mujunga. She was a black railway worker who a lot of anger over her death today, and the fact that police have now closed the case on her death, saying that it was not linked to the fact that she was spat at while at work by a man who said he had COVID-19. Her family and the BME community here very angry that no further action is going to be taken, and several of the banners here mention her name, calling for justice for Belly Mujunga today. And in terms of other sort of statistics that I can reference that other people have spoken to me about here, the Metropolitan Police are 4 times more likely to use force against a black person than a white person, and police have been given increased powers to stop and search, but a report has found, analysis of Home Office data has found that black people are 40 times more likely to be stopped and searched than a white person. So it's these issues that people here feel very strongly about. They still feel that there are huge racial injustices. The anger over George Floyd has very much spread here to the UK. People even here describing it as a Me Too moment for the anti-racist movement here in the UK. And more demonstrations are planned later this evening. Another anti-racism charity is encouraging people to take the knee. That, of course, is now an iconic move, synonymized with the Black Lives Matter movement around the world after American footballer Colin Kaepernick took the knee during the American national anthem to protest against police brutality. And police brutality is something that they're very keen to condemn here as well. However, the police chiefs in the UK have come together to issue a statement. They say we stand alongside all those across the globe who are appalled and horrified by the way George Floyd lost his life. Justice and accountability should follow. We strive continuously to learn and improve. We'll tackle bias, racism or discrimination wherever we find it.
All right, thank you so very much, Holly Hudson, for that in-depth report, and of course we are still showing those visuals there on our screen. Thank you, Holly, and you can see there that people have some banners up there. One caught my attention there saying no justice, no peace, and of course people in their numbers really coming out to protest the murder of George Floyd. And as Holly Hudson, our London correspondent,